All right. Here we go. And since we don't have a music bed, we're going to use the one that's basically on my mixer. So here we go. And we will eventually probably get a new music bed. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mark Talks About the Yankees, the only show where Mark talks about the Yankees and maybe some other teams as well. You know, who knows? Basically, I wanted to start this podcast just so I could get myself on a weekly schedule talking about the team. Hold on 1 second, timer. Talking about the team, talking about what they're doing during the offseason, and kind of finally decompressing after a 2022 season that was, and it just ends. Talking about a 2022 season that basically was disappointing. That wasn't what Yankee fans expected. I think, like all Yankee fans say, whenever a season ends like that, it's always a little bit of a disappointment. It's always a little bit, stop. It's always a little bit of a disappointment. It's always a little bit if it doesn't end in a World Series, it's not a successful season, which is a little bit irrational. But that's what Yankee fans come to expect. And after getting swept by the Houston Astros, 4 games that just seemed like the easiest 4 games that the Houston Astros ever played, simply outmatched the team. Looked like it didn't seem like they were formidable opponents going into that series. And the Houston Astros just took advantage of that team. But finally, after decompressing after that season and that disappointment, I thought maybe for this first episode, we finally jump into what's coming next for the New York Yankees. What's coming soon for 2023? What does this team look like? And judging from, no pun intended, but judging from the free agency market, judging from the people who are opting in and opting out of their contracts, it might look like a different team next year. It might look like something that we're not used to seeing. It might look like a rebuilding year if a lot of these people do not sign back with the Yankees, particularly the man of the hour, Aaron Judge. But before we get into these new things today, I thought what would be a fun thing to do on Veterans Day, no less, Happy Veterans Day, November 11th, 2022, would be to go back and look at the Brian Cashman press conference that happened about 6 days ago and see basically how we kind of feel about what their state of the team is and what it kind of looks like going forward. So I've got that kind of queued up here in the beginning, and I feel like we just take it beat by beat for now. And we'll start there. Let's see. Let me fade in here. Bam. Woo. All right. Let's see what he's got to say here. This was about a 42-minute press conference. And it seemed like they said a lot about the 2022 season and might give us a little bit of some conversation triggers about what we think going forward.
Anthony, to the left.
Do you have a new contract for yourself?
I do not. I have had a brief conversation with Halsteimer, so my contract expired October 31. He said we'll obviously talk, and he expressed interest in having me back. Of course, I'd like to stay, but we have not had any further discussions on that. Obviously, there's dealing with a lot of other employment stuff, with other people, but all in due time. So we'll see, how that plays out. But obviously, I'd love to stay, and he's expressed interest in having me stay. So that's all I can tell you so far.
Dan, to the right.
Just right off the bat, I don't think that this is necessarily a good look for the New York Yankees. We've seen recently in the past the Atlanta Braves, not particularly with their general manager, but with their players, that they'll lock them down early. They kind of won't go on this, will you sign me, will you not sign me? This might be very typical in Major League Baseball to kind of hold on to a GM and say, we'll just get it done later. But, if you're looking for stability for the team, you might want to you might want to sign him before he goes out and he's a non-employee speaking on behalf of the team. That, it's kind of a little bit awkward. It kind of reminds me in 2000, I think it was 7 or 2006, Joe Torre was finally finishing up his tenure, but they weren't going to give him a contract. But all year that was a question that was kind of peppering. The media was kind of peppering him with. So we knew this was going to happen at the end of the year. The fact that they couldn't kind of get it done mid-season is kind of striking to me. But maybe that is general protocol. Who knows?
Have you had any inquiries from other teams or any contact with other teams now that you're not under contract with the Yankees?
I don't think you can do that. So, but the answer is no. But I don't even think that they could reach out. But I'm sure. Anyway, no. I don't think there's any vacancies anyway. So, but no.
Chris to the left.
Looking back now, would you do anything differently with your process on deciding Donaldson and Kiner-Falefa were the right options for the left side of the infield?
No, I think every year it's you kind of go to market with trying to attack your areas of weakness, whatever your perceived areas of weaknesses are. So I know coming from last year's season, the 21 season, it was a first-round knockout and a wild card, and we wanted to get more athletic, improve our team defense, be in a position to relocate Labor back to second base and improve our defense, especially catcher too, and so we were able to do all that. You go engage the marketplace on the free agent side as well as the trade side, and it leads you to, either an array of choices or some limited choices. And so now I felt like we were able to attack a lot of areas and significantly improve the team from the previous year to give us a better chance as we entered the 22 season. And and so I know we wound up with a better defensive team like we had hoped. And so who we had, and whether it's the Donaldson, Kiner-Falefa. In Kiner's case, gave us an opportunity to bridge the gap, while the kids continued to develop, because everybody in the industry, fans and teams alike, recognize that we have some pretty potentially impactful prospects that are were developing and needed some more time. So no.
Were you satisfied then in totality with the overall production that they both bought, both defensively and offensively?
I think that Kiner was kind of along the lines of what we expected, and I think in Josh's case, both an elite defender and really typically a high-end offensive player. His offense this year struggled for whatever reason, and so obviously that was the an acknowledgement there that the offense wasn't as good as his normally is, but doesn't mean it can't return, because obviously it's not an injury issue with him in any way, shape, or form. So so hopefully looking forward to kind of return to normal, what he's capable of, because obviously he's had a hell of a career so far on both sides of the ball. So
I think this is where the argument kind of falls apart here a little bit when they start kind of resting on his historical achievements. I thought Donaldson was actually one of the weaker at bats that you could watch in the Yankee lineup. When they first traded for him, that was with the IKF Donaldson trade. I kind of liked the influx of new players. I liked Gio Urshela. He wasn't going to give you 30 home runs a year or anything like that, but I liked his kind of bat. I liked his defense. I always thought he was solid. When they kind of got rid of him, to me it was surprising, because I thought Gio could have had a kind of almost Scott Brocious like influence on the team. A third baseman that's not going to be sitting in the center field monuments anytime soon, but it's one of those people that are an important piece for those Yankee teams. Plus, it was a contact bat, that I didn't think that they were going to be willing to trade away to the Twins, but they did, and they kind of traded it for power, hoping that Donaldson would perform. And I believe it was the first game of the season when Donaldson actually, brought in the winning run that opening day of 2022. that I was like, oh, this could be a difference maker in the team. But as the year kind of had gone on, playing time was kind of sporadic at third base, DH, wherever they decided to play him. And by the time the playoffs rolled around, it was almost a guaranteed strikeout or K. I know he ripped a double down the line in one of the games towards the end, but it wasn't a solid at bat. And I don't think that, in retrospect, if you look at that deal, and if you just go one Gio, it was Gio and Gary, I think, for Donaldson and IKF. There may have been somebody else attached to that trade as well. If you look at that trade, I don't think it's, getting rid of Gary Sanchez was probably an improvement defensively. But getting rid of Gio in replace of Donaldson, I think, hurt the actual lineup a little bit more than it actually helped it, especially down the line. The bottom half of that lineup last year was just kind of pathetic. It wasn't an exciting watch. And I think they've confirmed since that Donaldson's going to be back at third base, and I think not addressing that weakness is probably not a good sign for 2023, because they definitely do. If he continues to hit the way that he hit last year, they got to make a move. They have to make a move. They can't just keep rolling the same thing out, but they have to kind of address that position with some sort of authority, and something else, maybe a contact batter, maybe something. They can't just keep rolling it out. Now the shift might change the dynamic of what his numbers look like next year, but it's going to change everybody's numbers next year. I don't think that we can rely on that. He hit, his batting average was 222. His OPS was 682. Everything's going to scale basically, because the shift is going to bring it back to more traditional play of baseball a little bit. But honestly, it's about contact, and it's about putting the ball in play, and no matter how you want to respond to that, it's about getting wood on the ball at some point. Whether you're hitting a home run or whether you're just trying to get a single, it's about getting that contact, and he wasn't doing that last year. And so that's something that I feel like needs to be probably addressed. But let's fade through. Let's keep on going, shall we?
Andy and Brian.
A couple of your free agents, Carpenter and Rizzo. Do you have interest in bringing them back?
Rizzo's under contract through next year, but he has an opt-out. So, it very well may be a formality. I don't know. But, we're going through our pro scouting meetings already this week. Both players really impactful for us. One was hurt, in Carpenter, for a period of time, unfortunately. But Rizzo did a great job. So we were certainly happy that we retained him, and we'd love to have him playing first base with us going forward. But, we got obviously discussions to be had as we move forward, and that'll declare itself at some point. And even if it's an opt-out, we'll still stay engaged.
I know you didn't have conversations with Judge and his agent about a contract after opening day through the end of the season. Has that changed? Have you engaged them? Are they you since the end of your season?
I'm going to no comment on that, but just restate what has been stated by me and ownership and Aaron Boone and anybody related to the Yankees. We'd love to be able to bring Aaron Judge back and have him maintain being a member of this franchise, and the career path he's currently on is Hall of Fame like, and nothing better than to have him continue to man right field for us and impact us both on and off the field the way he has thus far. So we'll have certainly the conversations as promised and see where they take us. But he's put himself in a great position to have a lot of choices, and so.
Brian, to the right.
I think he brings up two things there. I mean, there's two big decisions looming on the Yankees offseason right now, and that's Judge and Rizzo right now. Those are the kind of like 1-2 punch in your lineup that you probably need to get back, not counting Stanton. But obviously Judge is the big free agent this year. I think you got to sign him back. I don't think you can let him go. I think if you're going in a different direction and you're trying to rebuild this franchise from the ground up, potentially you let him go, but that would be a very un-Yankee-like move from the front office. And I think it's a homegrown player, and it's and basically the amount of money that the name Judge 99, the jersey sales, all the kind of merchandise sales that they're getting off of him, I think it's kind of like it's probably too valuable to let go at this point. And they probably need to kind of offer him what he did. I mean, what he did last year was phenomenal. I mean, 62 home runs in a down offensive year is incredible and should be rewarded. He's probably got the greatest free agency year performance ever. But you do have to kind of put it in the perspective of what does the team look like going forward. Maybe 8 years from now. Say they offer him 7 to 8 years or something like that, or 6 to 7 years. You're talking about a player who's 30 years old. Are they going to be that same player when they're 37? And that I feel like is the conversation that they're having, is not necessarily what he's going to do in the short term. It's what is going to happen in the long term. I mean, we've seen these long contracts, and by the end of their contract, they're just not the same player anymore. I mean, Alex Rodriguez, steroid scandal aside, you look at him by the end of 2015, 2016, by the time he finally hung it up, and I think they eventually kind of cut ties and finished up that contract. I mean, he was not an impact player at that point. I mean, and that was a rebuilding year. I think the next year they went to the playoffs, but I don't think in 2016 they qualified for the playoffs. But those long contracts have a way of biting you. And, you can't, and especially with a player like Judge, who's kind of an anomaly, who's very tall, he's a hefty guy, he's very, and he's super athletic, but is that going to last over 7 years? And I think that's the conversation that they're probably having in the back, and whether that's worth the millions of dollars you're going to pay him. And especially considering that you had him this year, and you had the people around him, and they still came up short. I mean, injuries aside, is that the player that's going to lead you to what the ultimate goal is, which is the world championship? And, I think that's them playing devil's advocate. Do I think they should sign him? Of course. I think you need a centerpiece to build around. Just like how I think the Nationals were kind of reckless in terms of trading away all the players that brought people to the ballpark to see. I mean, Juan Soto still had time on his contract, and they traded him away. I think that's giving away ticket sales at some point, because I think people were coming, myself included, who I'm in the Washington area. I think I was going to the ballpark sometimes to see Soto, just to see that at bat, because they had traded away so many players, and some of the rookies are not making names of themselves just yet. But you were coming to see that player, and I think there's a contingency of New York that is coming to see Judge when they go to the ballpark. I know I went to Baltimore earlier this year to go see the Yankees, and Judge was on a rest day, and I was pissed. And I was as a Yankee fan, I wanted to see him, and he was not playing. And to me, that changed the dynamic of the team. Sure, was it fun to see Stanton? Yes. Was it fun to see Rizzo? Yes. Was it fun to see all the other players? But you're coming to see 99. You're coming to see Aaron Judge. You're coming to see now the new American League home run record leader. You're coming to see him. He is the entertainment in this case. So anyway, let's kind of transition back, and let's see what else they've got to say here.
Aaron Boone was in here, and he said he believes you guys are close to winning a championship. You were under 500 from July 9 on, I believe. What makes you believe you're close?
Well, I think we typically have teams on a yearly basis, that enter the postseason that have a chance to win. This year's particular squad, we got depleted going into the postseason. We had a lot of injuries, so I think referencing the record that you touched upon, I think doesn't reflect the talent. It reflected a lot of havoc wreaked on the roster, as we entered the second half, as well as entering the postseason, and put us in a position to be kind of trying to figure out, we're rehabbing our closer in the postseason, right? we're we're giving at bats to someone that hadn't played and felt like 2 months in Carpenter in the postseason. We're it is what it is. It's all hands on deck. But we were obviously clearly not the defined roster that you know what you can get, and it just comes down to how the competition is going to be playing out. It's one of those, the roster turned into being in certain places, auditions or curiosity. We'll give it a shot and see where it takes us and hope for the best. And all players that were involved were, I got to give them all credit. They, team first. So Clay Holmes, for instance, is I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to help you guys, but no one knew what the results would be like. And then Carp, same thing. We thought about activating him at that Texas series, and he wanted to go to the alternate site and get at bats from live pitching, so he can, instead of getting maybe 4 at bats in a game down during that Texas series that last weekend of the season, he was like, I'd rather get 10 at bats a day against live pitching, in Somerset if we can, and get to see if we can close the gap and knock the rust off and simulate as much as we possibly could. So we had a few guys, unfortunately, rehabbing during the postseason. Not ideal, but still, those are the type of guys that if we can get them right, would give us our best chance. So I think ultimately that was why we, entered the postseason, or that second half record the way you reflected. So that's just how it played out. Losing, we certainly hope.
The interesting thing about this is that a lot of the excuse that they kind of put forward, and maybe excuse is a bad word here, but the reasoning that they put forward about their lack of performance in the playoffs was due to injury. But if you watch the Yankees and you have kind of seen their methods over the last 5-6 years or so, they do have an emphasis on rest days, right? So a lot of times you'll see a player have a incredible performance, 3 for 4 day, the home run and a double or whatever, a couple whatever, a single, a strikeout, whatever. And the next day they'll be resting. They'll get the day off, right? The idea of playing 162 is not an option anymore, right? And they emphasize rest like on a regular basis, and the players still get hurt. So you start to wonder whether their thought process, or whether they've thought about maybe this resting these players each day, maybe that's not helping us. Now, maybe there's going to be more injuries if you don't. I don't know. I mean, I know certainly players play through things and they get banged up, but this idea of constantly resting your players is just not working out. And also, you got to build a roster that is going to be able to accommodate these things as they go forward. So, and the fact that we kind of rolled into the postseason depleted, I mean, it kind of spoke to the lack of deals at the deadline that happened. I mean, the year before, DJ LeMahieu was hurt as well in the playoffs. I believe so. It was either that or the year before that. And he was gone again. I mean, Carpenter came back, but he was gone for about 2 months. And so he was like fresh right off of the IL. I mean, what kind of at bat are you going to get from him? It turns out not a great one. But so you got to build your roster so you can fill in those spots. And the Yankee bench this year, which was for the entire year, like Marwin Gonzalez. I mean, the kids, Cabrera, Peraza towards the end of the year, Gallo in the very beginning. Aaron Hicks, who was on the bench, depending on who was playing out there, just wasn't strong. Tim LaCastro, who's now a free agent, who just became a free agent this afternoon. They weren't great options off the bench, even though, we barely got to see some of these players, i.e. Tim LaCastro, play because they had a designated role on the team. But yeah, these injuries, this reasoning that, hey, we would have been a different team had we been healthy. Sure, that definitely plays out. But I think you got to build your team so that if you do have those injuries, you can actually sustain and you can at least keep up a competitive play. That's just my thought, though.
To get Benintendi back didn't happen, and
Benintendi,
if
yeah.
we advanced, we could have had him back potentially for, the World Series, but we never got a chance to figure that out.
Matthew, back left.
With Judge, a lot of fans are going to say, like, he needs to be the top priority no matter what, do whatever it takes, give him a blank check, whatever. How do you sort of balance the knowledge of, like, knowing how important he is to the team and to the franchise with also trying to just make a sound business decision?
I mean, it involves a lot of people, And
I think this is
ultimately
what we
the
were
owner,
talking about. We were talking about this is the
has
business
to take everything
side.
into account because it's first. He checks all the boxes. The box of does he help you win games on the field first and foremost, and then will he do so moving forward? There's no guarantee in terms of health in any of these situations. But when you make these commitments on players, he's a fan favorite. He interacts with our fans extremely well. He's respected within that clubhouse. Goes about his business as good as you possibly can, and is an elite performer and one of the game's best, if not the best player. And so, with all that being said, those are the type that you want to retain and have and as long as you possibly can. And it involves a lot of different categories. You want a team that can compete for a championship and ultimately win a championship. Player like him would help you do that as we move forward. Also, he's going to drive, as George Steinbrenner would say, fannies in the seats. People want to go watch that guy play. And you want to put great teams out on the field that they want to go. They want to come here to watch.
They want to buy their
wins.
jersey.
But certain individual players transcend the team, and everything stops when they're at the bat or if they have the ball in their hand, and so he's one of those type talents. So ultimately, Hal Steinbrenner, will collect all information, from the industry standpoint, where people are in free agency, things can get pretty crazy, and then obviously factor in, everything else, that are non-baseball related, whether it's, obviously what drives our fan base and showing up and supporting us. And, he wants to make them happy, and he's always been driven that way, is to try to make our fans happy. And so hopefully, we'll have some positive conversations that lead to the outcome that we want, but we'll see.
As of right now, do you have a hard number that you won't go over when it comes to like dollar amount
No
or
comment.
years on his contract?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah.
Sweeney.
You want to tell us now or later what you offered Judge?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment at this stage on any of it. But ultimately, as I said, I'll just restate that what we've done throughout is we'd love to keep him and we'd love to have him back. And obviously he placed a bet on himself before the season, and that bet has paid off. And he had an amazing run, and continued to add to that back of his baseball card. And he's got a lot more game left in him. And so we hope that game happens to remain in the pinstripes. That's just all I can say.
I think over the course of this last contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this offseason, because if they don't sign him early, then like, how do you account for that? Do you have like a pot of money that you're like, well, okay, this is going to be the budget for Judge? And I think that's when they were trying to pry Cashman a little bit by saying, well, do you have a number that you won't go over? Because I think they need to plan for that, because they have to address other things on the field a little bit, and try to manage, well, what are you going to give him? And then if you're trying to go after any other player or any other free agent, there's Trey Turner, who's a free agent this year, coming off of the Dodgers. Are you going to go after him? But how can you make that accounting decision in your mind if you don't know what you're already obligated for Judge, right? And I think this is a different, because they don't have a sense of where he's going or what he wants to do, because I think he's been so quiet about it. They can't necessarily rest on like, hey, well, he's probably going to take this much. I mean, maybe they do have this information, but there's actually an interesting, where is it? Brian Hoke, the reporter for the New York Yankees, talked to Derek Jeter, must have been at the GM meetings or something like that. but he had a interesting Jeter had an interesting quote when talking about the about that he was already decided about where he wanted to go. I don't think that Derek was going to go anyplace else besides the Yankees. So his free agency was a lot simpler than something like Judge. But I don't think that the Yankees actually know. I think there's a possibility that Judge could go someplace else. Do I think that it would be the actual rational decision to do? If I were in his shoes, I think there's too much to lose leaving the Yankee organization. I think maybe that's different if you're inside the Yankees organization, but I think the benefit that it gets you not only in your career but after your career, I think is so much higher than if you go to a smaller market team. Do I think Judge is going to go to a small? Do I think Judge is going to be signed with the Pirates? No, but do I think that? Do I think he might go to the Giants where he grew up? That's the speculation. The Red Sox, the Phillies, like these big market teams could take him away. But do I think the benefit that you get afterwards from being a Yankee, I think might be too much to actually just step away from. But his life, his decision. Plenty of people have done it. But I think if he wants to be that the Derek Jeter, this generation's Derek Jeter, I think he's got to stay in pinstripes. I think he's got to make that decision. Actually, here's that tweet from. Let me see here. See if I can get this over here. Here is the tweet from. Let's see.
But I at least said I wasn't talking.
If he came to you for advice, what would you tell him?
Probably exactly what I just told you. I have no idea what you're going through. I mean, you're in a good position where you have options. I think everyone wants to have options. Now, it's up to you whether or not you're going to explore those options. But I can't offer much in that. So, I mean, I really don't know. I think most athletes don't ever reach free agency.
Oh, here we go.
Free agent, you have options for the first time in your career, or at least for him for the first time in his career. So, he's going to make a decision that's best for him, best for his family. But I can't relate to it because I was a free agent. I said I wasn't going anywhere, so I didn't talk to any other teams. Not saying any other teams were interested, but I at least said I wasn't talking to them.
If he came to you for advice,
There we go. So yeah. I mean, like again, it's I think in very Derek Jeter fashion. I mean, this is he was the guy who was going to stay with the Yankees for a long time, and he was going to stay with the Yankees for the rest of his career. I don't think that there really was a decision there, but when it comes to Judge, I think there potentially could be a situation where he leaves the Yankees and goes in a different direction here. Let me try to get that window back open. 1 second. Here we go. All right, here we go. So, and we transition and we fade. There we go. And
there's been a lot of turnover throughout the organization, minor league coaching staff, major league coaching staff, your training staff. You changed hitting coaches a couple of times. And the reasons behind it are usually pretty transparent. Can you shed any light on how your analytics department is evaluated? Have there been changes there? Is there such a thing as good information, bad information, right or wrong that they provide, and how it's deployed and utilized? Is there any transparency you can offer in how they're evaluated for their job?
Analytics is really information. So, ultimately they're charged with collecting, streamlining in a very efficient way and simplifying, information for our coaches and scouts, front office members like myself to digest. It's as simple as that. So, and the interpretation and how do you share it, and then certain players might gravitate or coaches might gravitate to certain aspects of it more than others, and some of it gets disregarded altogether. So, all our personnel are evaluated constantly, and the one word I would use is the trust tree. The more recommendations or suggestions or profiles or reporting that gets provided that turns out either right on the money or 110% accurate, whatever it is, you climb that trust tree, and I know that a lot of teams have come after our personnel for their departments, to try to pull from our end. I think Halsteimer allows us to keep, the best people we possibly can and retain them. And so, our analytics department is no different. We've had a lot of people, either get pulled from other departments, other industries, or asked for by other clubs, and understandably so. But I'm not sure how to answer it other than that. They're really good at what they do.
I guess what I'm
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to, I think what they're trying to figure out is basically, can they is the analytic approach that they're going with, is it a good approach? And judging from the results from 2009 on, I guess after the 2009 season, I think people are starting to question that, right? I think they're starting to question whether are the Yankees turning into something of the Braves of the 90s, right? They can win that one time, but they're just going to constantly be in the top of the East, or at least like competitive in the East. I think they're going to make the playoffs each year, especially with it expanded. But are they going to continue to do this approach where they'll put competitive teams on the field, teams that can win like 99 games, but when it comes to actually getting the job done, are they going to constantly fall short because maybe some of the analytical information is leading them in directions that is not necessarily, it might look great on paper, but doesn't actually produce the results that they want. I think the Yankees this year, I think their lineup is, looking at it from a before the season, I think you look at it and go, wow, that's a pretty powerful lineup. If everyone hits, I think that you're dealing with an offense to be reckoned with. I think their pitching has been solid over the last couple of years. Like the addition of a healthy Luis Severino, Garrett Cole is going to be Garrett Cole. I mean, he's that's a 1-2 punch that's great. I think Nestor Cortez came out of nowhere and basically became, one of the more reliable pitchers. I wish they still had Jordan Montgomery, but he's with the Cardinals now. But I think their pitching has always been solid, and their pitching continues to be solid and will continue to be solid. But their hitting, just not enough. Walk, strikeout, home run. That is what they're built on. And they don't have any players, in my estimation, they don't have any players that really can punch them out of that cycle. I think a healthy DJ LeMahieu gets the ball in play. I think Aaron Judge batting at the top of the lineup is an interesting move. I think that's probably something that's brought on by new baseball. I think maybe towards the end of the season, I think that was a little bit more of the home run chase. You just wanted to get him as many at-bats as possible. I think Aaron Judge is a great contact player. I think he's a great all-around player. I think that bottom half of the lineup, that the Josh Donaldson, even Cabrera. He was a rookie this year, and you can't expect too much from the rookie. But in the playoffs, it just wasn't the same batter. It was almost a guaranteed strikeout. I think Stanton, when he's cold, is one of the worst looking at bats ever. When he's making contact with the ball, he's crushing it. There's balls that he's hit that have not come down yet. He's incredibly strong, but I think he's too susceptible to that down and away slider. And when pitchers have a filthy slider, I think Stanton goes down pretty easily. I think you need players like that, like Benintendi, that great addition of Benintendi, to kind of get on base, to set the table for these power players to drive them in. I think that's old traditional baseball. I think the Mets are kind of set up like that. I think you need like someone like a Nimmo. You need someone like a Jeff McNeil. You need somebody, even like Frankie Lindor, somebody who can put the ball in play, slash a double down the line, and get runners in scoring position. Because I think that pressure that those types of batters can put on the opposing team can be the difference between you winning and losing the game. For those of you that can remember, there is the 2004 Red Sox were the perfect example of a hitting machine. And they were down 3-0 to the Yankees, but they came back. But it was because they had players up and down that lineup that could put the ball in play, that could essentially, get on base. And look at what just the pressure of a fast player like Dave Roberts back then did to one of the greatest closers ever, right? Puts pressure on the defense. The 2015 Kansas City Royals, it's the same thing that I think that the Yankees need to start addressing. They need to have those contact players in the lineup. It cannot just be power. The shift might help with this next year. I mean, a player like Rizzo hitting that low is kind of reminiscent of a Mark Teixeira, who was a great, high average hitter with the Rangers. And then when they started shifting on him, his average just kept plummeting. And so depending on how they enforce that next year, which is still a little bit up in the air, I think is something that could change the name of the team. So let's take a little bit more from Brian Cashman, and then we'll probably start to try to wrap up here because we're heading up in 40 minutes. So let's fade over. And
what I'm asking is, like, coaches can lose their jobs not necessarily based on processes or how hard they work, but based on results.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I'd say that, if anything, I stand here to you today as a general manager that's been fortunate enough to be involved for how many years now, somewhere in the 20s as a GM. And in many, I have interaction with, head coaches and front office executives throughout not just baseball, but other sports. And I think I'm living proof, and I think our ownership is living proof of the fact that, people don't get let go because of results. If they have a good process and they're doing the job well and they have, sound answers and reasonings, and, the ultimate outcome doesn't happen, I think that's taken into account. And so anybody that we've lost along the way, it's either players are off of or the process that they implemented or chose, again, with information provided, and suggestions made along the way. It depends on each individual circumstance. But whenever changes happen, they don't come easy. They come with a lot of sound decision making as you evaluate it, and ultimately, as we try to find higher ground, you have those hard discussions, and then you weigh, I think, I don't know if you use the word evolving and evolution and stuff like that. So we're always looking to get better and find better and gravitate to better. And first and foremost, we try to, do that internally, give people a chance to work through, find higher ground collectively. The ones that we've lost along the way are the ones that refuse to adapt and adjust and grow, with what's out there within the industry, because there's always something new that's happening. And if someone's less curious and it's being utilized in other operations to success, and we've actually tried to push it and they had no interest in it, and then the ultimate outcome is failure, then I would say that the process starts getting questioned, because you refuse to utilize every tool in the toolbox. So I've never walked away from somebody that's good at what they do, that has a sound process, and the results didn't play out the certain way. I've actually supported them. So.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I mean,
your offense was somewhere in the middle of the road in terms of batting average, hits, strikeouts. We've seen the effectiveness of a contact-heavy offensive philosophy.
Here we go.
How much do you view that as an area of need for your lineup?
I mean, Exhibit A was what we tried to do last year to try to attack that area of weakness. We retained, we traded for Rizzo the previous year mid-season, one of the higher contact-oriented guys to, obviously we signed DJ LeMahieu to an extension a few years back, a very high contact-oriented guy, and we traded for Andrew Benintendi, mid-season, to play left field. And unfortunately, two of those guys come off the board, that were massively, important pieces to that contact-oriented approach. So when I touched upon trying to improve the defense, check box, trying to improve the contact, boxes were checked. Those are examples of it. But then things changed along the way when we lost certain key guys. I mean, it's frustrating. Andrew Benintendi, you acquire, and who would have thought that from an old hamate surgery that he had removed and never was even aware that it was possible. It's very rare to have some, whoever the surgeon was didn't get the whole hamate and it grew back and snapped on our watch. It's just, injuries happen. Nothing you can do about it, but it was an important piece that we could have utilized. And, I appreciated everything Andrew did to try to be ready, get back as soon as he possibly could. That was, I mean, we had a good crew in there that wanted to punch that win column all the way to the end, and in some cases, some guys were physically unable to do it, but behind the scenes, if you didn't see or if fans didn't see, everything guys like Karp or Holmes or Benintendi or Montas or others trying to do to get back, and then you throw that on conjunction with the guys that were active and they're competing to the best of their abilities. Their hearts were all in the right spot.
So, other than Judge, what do you view as your areas of priority in free agency?
Yeah, and so again, I mean, this goes back to like they're not wrong. I mean, even Harrison Bader, I think, was one of the other people that they failed to mention this year that really made a difference. I mean, really, truly, we saw in the playoffs. I mean, without Harrison Bader, I don't think that you have nearly any offensive numbers outside of him. I mean, Judge struggled throughout the entire postseason, but Harrison Bader really stepped up. Who knew? And kind of justified that trade that a lot of people were down on come the trade deadline, letting go of Jordan Montgomery. But yeah, I think the Yankees going forward, they've really got to address some of these issues and maybe some of the contact players that they thought were going to be contact players maybe worked in different eras of baseball. Maybe they work a little bit better next year when the shift is addressed and when we have more of a normal form of baseball playing. I mean, God knows how boring it was. I've been watching baseball for a long, long time, and the shift made that game, an already slow game, worse. I mean, it was not fun to watch a ball go straight up the middle and go right into a fielder's glove. I mean, any kind of athleticism that they can show would be better in this case. But anyways, we're at the 45-minute mark. I'm going to wrap it up right now. And so we got about 15 minutes into that press conference that was via the Yes Network. They go on to talk a lot about the team and maybe the team going forward in signings and how they felt that everyone performed. But hopefully they start addressing some of these things in the offseason. They've just the offseason's in its infancy right now. Aaron Judge still a free agent. Rizzo has opted out. He is a free agent. They've done a couple different minor league signings. Johnny Brito. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. Is part of the conversation now, or at least like selected to the 40-man. So we'll see what they do. We'll see if they make a lot of different splashes. We'll see what this lineup looks like going forward. But for now, that's going to do it for me. I'm going to continue to use the music bed that is on my mixer until I can find something a little bit more production appropriate. So until then, we're going to fade this up and we're going to say goodbye. Thanks. And I promise to get better music next time.